Ladies and gentlemen, дорогі друзі, welcome to our virtual party to celebrate Ukrainian Independence Day. My name is Olesa Khromichuk, and I am the director of the Ukrainian Institute London, an independent charity whose task it is to spread the word about Ukraine in the UK and beyond. And we are able to do this thanks to your ongoing support, for which we are truly grateful. You have just heard a message from the Institute's patrons, which they recorded from all over the world. And our guests today will also be joining us from different continents. And we are so pleased that throughout the last year, a difficult year for all of us, we managed to build a very strong and truly international community of people who are interested in all things Ukrainian. Okay, and I really don't wish to take up any more of our time today, so I'd like to introduce our first moderator, Nina Mari. She is an accomplished poet and prolific translator. She has published a number of poetry collections and has translated a great variety of works from Russian and Ukrainian, including Oksana Zabushko's Museum of Abandoned Secrets. Nina is currently translating Oksana Lutsyshyna's Ivan and Phoebe, which is forthcoming with Deep Vellum soon. Not only will we talk about this excellent work at some length today, we will also hear an exclusive reading from the novel in Nina's translation. And I'd also like to add that Nina is an absolutely invaluable volunteer at the Ukrainian Institute London. We're extremely grateful for all the help that she has offered us over the last few months. Nina, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Olesa, and it is so wonderful to be here and to finally see this event come together. I know we have all worked very hard to pull it together, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Oksana Lutsyshyna, who is joining us from Texas, I believe. Okay, great.
Yes.
Yep. And who is a fantastic writer, a professor and an educator and a poet and a translator as well. We all do many things and we all translate many things, but Oksana actually has the magnificent talent for actually writing prose, which is something that I do not do. I can only translate. So, well, maybe not yet. So today, we're working on Ivan and Phoebe, which won the Shevchenko Award just recently. It has been acquired by Deep Vellum and is coming out next spring. And I would be remiss if I did not point out that now a silent auction that we're running to support online programming by the Ukrainian Institute, there is a lot that you could bid on, which is 5-book subscription from Deep Vellum, the publisher. And they assured us that you can wait to cash it in until the book comes out. And you can have 5 different books, or you can just get yourself 5 copies of Oksana's wonderful novel when it gets out. So, Oksana, it's great. So we worked together on picking out an excerpt that would be appropriate. The novel, part of the novel takes place during Revolution na Granite, the Revolution on the Granite. So let's see how the connection holds up and see if you want to say anything. You've seen what I picked.
Yes, that would be lovely. And it's a great pleasure to be here and to see you, dear Nina, and to meet Olesa, at least virtually, and to see all our guests.
All right, so I will not hold it up too much. So as the title suggests, the main characters are Ivan and Phoebe. Ivan makes an appearance in this excerpt, and Phoebe does not at the moment, but there is another girl, Rose. Do you want to say anything about the relationship between Ivan and Rose, kind of what kind of figure she is?
Well, Ivan is a young boy from Uzhhorod who comes to Lviv to get his higher education. And he joins this milieu of people who eventually will be the core of those who created the Revolution on the Granite in 1990. It was one of the things that they did. They did a lot of other things too. And Rose is his basically college girlfriend who is very dedicated to the cause and also is a little bit of a what we could call now feminist, but in those days that was definitely a bad word in Ukraine. So yeah, so eventually that will be a little bit of a conflict there.
Okay. And then another person who figures is Yarema, who is the organizer kind of the student movement. Mm-hmm. And we're going to pick up and media res in the middle of the story. So the students are organizing, they've done some things, right? And they are going to Kiev. So I shall now do the reading. It is not very long, and I will do my best. And
Thank you.
this bit has not been heard in English before, so this is an exclusive preview, okay? We're in Kiev, we're on the Maidan. Ivan closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, Rose stood before him. You! But he could only exhale. The girls were not supposed to come with them. This had occasioned a storm. The girls argued they wanted to be a part of the protest, but the guys, Yarema foremost, were implacable. No and no, because it was likely, guaranteed in fact, to be dangerous. Having any girls participate in the hunger strike was out of the question. They were future mothers and could not jeopardize their health. My health? How'd you put it? Future children. You should be ashamed of yourself. You're a hypocrite. Rose yelled into Yarema's face when he declared his position during the last meeting before they went to Kiev. Why should I be held hostage by my own body? You don't think there is anything wrong with this, do you? You don't feel I should be the one who decides what to do with my body? I and I alone, and not some phantom children that I might never want to have. Yarema said only that it was an order, it had been decided, and the point was not open to discussion. On their way back from the meeting to their dorms, Ivan kept trying to cheer Rose up. He genuinely did not understand why Rose could not accept the leadership's decision, since it had been dictated by logic and a rational approach to things. How do you not understand? It's discrimination. Rose could barely breathe, she was so furious. Wait, what? How? Ivan asked. He felt insulted because he really, truly did not understand. How is it discrimination that I was born a man and you a woman? Shall we be mad at evolution itself for having us be born humans and not, say, pythons? What do pythons have to do with anything? Rose stood there in the street lamp light in the middle of the sidewalk and gasping and rushing, not entirely sure how to put what she felt into words, shouted into Ivan's face that she would not be treated as a body, like a piece of meat, that she was a person, and Yarema's order could mean only one thing, that the guys did not see her as an equal human being, that they dehumanized her. You're wrong, Ivan argued back, waving his arms at her. You know full well it's not like that. It's just that we're different. We have different jobs to do. Who told you that? And if so, then why was it only in the 20th century that women got the vote? Women fought in the Kangaroo uprising right along with the men. What are you talking about, the vote? Why can't you see that we just want to protect you? And what's Kangaroo got to do with anything? Those were prisoners. It was totally different. And the vote, that's not fair either. Men, the serfs, didn't have the vote, did they? Plus, all we're talking about is one protest, a single event. You've gone everywhere with us before, to Zaporizhia and other places, right? We did. And what did we do there while you were busy with your all-important men's work? We'd get up, go get the water, boil it, make food, feed you, wash up, sweep, tidy, and then it was time to make lunch, and it was like that all day. Did you forget? Oh, I'm sorry, how could you forget? You never even noticed. None of this even existed for you. Ivan felt deeply upset, but there was no way he could have gotten a single word into Rose's harangue. And now you won't take us with you because, of course, you won't need anyone to make you food. You're going to starve. You're going to be heroes. Rose. And that was how they parted. Ivan felt terrible about the argument and about the deserted street that stretched before him like a premonition of something that hadn't yet happened but was one day destined to come. And now there she was, right in front of him, happy, smiling, elated. Turned out, Rose had brought their banner, the blue and yellow one. Somehow they had left it behind when they packed. She also found the time to call the rest of the girls on leave to tell them to come because they also had the right to protest and to be there. Yarema started to object and tried to talk to her, but this time she did not even engage with him. She kept smiling, And with Nila Krukova's wholehearted endorsement, the girls absolutely have the right to go on hunger strike and to be here. And you, Rose, will stay with me for the night. Put on the white headband and lay down on a cot. Even then, she looked like stubbornness incarnate. Someone local brought the first bunch of flowers and put it down on the granite pavement right outside the perimeter. Asters. Their yellow and red blooms burned on the gravestone like flares of alarm. That's that.
Thank you so much, Nina. That was wonderful.
I really get into it when Rose is arguing with Ivan. I really feel for her.
It even mentions, that excerpt even mentions the flag, which is very relevant because yesterday we celebrated the day of the Ukrainian flag.
So I think our plan was, hopefully we have interested people in the book, and the plan was to have anybody ask any questions that they have while we have Oksana here. It's doesn't happen very often that you have the writer and the translator in the same room and they're both unmuted and the connection is working. I wanted to know, I wondered, and I'm sure you get this question all the time, sort of how you went about reconstructing those scenes on the Maidan, like how much documentary research is in there and how much is fiction?
Yes, that's a great question. And actually, I don't know how it turned out because I myself wasn't there. I was too young to be part of this event. So first of all, I read everything that was available, and I have to say it's not very much. And even some of the very good interviews with the people who actually participated in it are just scattered throughout internet. And as books, very few things have been published in Ukraine. There's a collection now that's published due to as a proceedings of a conference that took place in Poland, of all places. Then of course I had conducted my own interviews with people who were there. And it's actually amazing how human memory works because it's never linear. And it actually sometimes is not even memory at all. I mean, we all have these moments where 4 people went to a party and 4 people tell completely different story of what happened there. So it was very much like this because people, you know, these are events that happened in the past, kind of distant past. And after that, it became kind of a legend. So people remember the discourse of the legend, but they may not remember what the streets smelled like, what the trees looked like, and so on and so forth. Some did, some did not. It really depends. Everybody was equally valuable, of course. But I have to mention specifically one person who helped me with this, imagining this scene enormously, and that is Taras Prochasko, who is also a very well-known Ukrainian writer and also a recipient of Shevchenko National Award of the previous year. He was, you know, the moment that man started speaking, I started having a vision because that's what he does. That's what he does. He evokes things. Yeah, and then of course there were some videos on YouTube nowadays, so I could actually watch those. There was a very moving video of Nila Krukova addressing militia. So this was actually not at the same event, but it was very much matching the pathos of what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's lovely. We have a hand up from Ursula.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Oksana. Can you tell us, this evening is all about when we were there and when we weren't there, and you were there, but you were too young, I think, to be in the Revolution of Granite, and I wasn't there for the Revolution of Granite on Granite. But tell us what you do remember from that time. And you know how as you get older, you reframe your memories. Tell us how you now reframe your memories of that time.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for this question. It's also a great question, and also along the similar lines of how human memory works and what we can and cannot remember and what we do remember. And it's of ultimate importance for us because our history has been rewritten so many times, written over by people who shouldn't have been doing that. Well, I was about 15 and I was living in Uzhhorod with my parents. And Uzhhorod, which is where the majority of the events of the novel is set, is, you know, it's the western border of Ukraine, bordering on Slovakia, and Hungary is like 20 minutes to drive. So it's a very particular area, not the most politically engaged. Nowadays that changed a bit, but at those days, Uzhhorod, you know, and Transcarpathia in general, they were the hub of people, you know, tending to their business. And you can understand them because within like 20th century, they lived within, what, 5 or 6 countries. There's even a joke about an old man from the village whom somebody asked, like, when was life best? During the Czechs, the Hungarians, the Soviets, the Ukrainians, or whatnot? And he says, oh, during the Czechs, children, because I was so young. So like literally the guy never left his village and lived in 5 places. So people were not rushing into political activity because their fortress was their home, and that's how you survive. So with that said, I was just as politically disengaged as the town itself. I had no idea what was going on. Neither did my parents. My mother was reading my novel with this deep sense of surprise, like, really, has this happened? We never knew. And because you see that partly was the policy of the government. They were suppressing any news that could have come out from there. So, but then a couple guys came to our high school. They were from the students from the university, and they were supporting the Lviv students. So they were also on a hunger strike, and they had these bands here, and they came to our school and talked to us about it, whether we supported. We decided that we supported very much, and we ran off from our classes, the rest of our classes today, and went to the movies. So that's how we supported the revolution. I know it sounds awful, but unfortunately that is the truth. And talking about reframing the memory now, I can see even better how the ideologies worked, because even the ideology of indifference is actually a very powerful ideology, unfortunately.
And I was even younger. I shouldn't date myself, but it's interesting, Oksana, you talk about reframing memories, and I cannot tell the difference between now between what I remember and what I've translated, other people's memories that I have translated. Because the revolution makes the appearance in Museum of Abandoned Secrets, and that was such a big lift. I think I vaguely remember because my brother ended up drafted into my half brother. He was drafted into Soviet army and sent into Mongolia. And I remember, like, that was such a big deal, right? Like Mongolia for a kid, and he sent me letters from there and all this kind of stuff. So I just thought it was super exciting. And then later on, a cousin of mine was being drafted, and I think it was right at that time. So I remember the demand and the decision to base draftees within Ukraine and not send them outside.
Well, and Lviv was a very different city at the end of the 1980s or beginning 1990s. Uzhhorod was not quite like that. People went to Lviv to just kind of get inspired, because Lviv had all the big meetings and people rallying and so on. And Uzhhorod, not really. Maybe in the kitchens, in quiet, in private.
He was cultivating writers, let's be honest.
So there's no person that I ever spoke to was not enlightening. I of course I spoke to Marek Ivashchishin and Igor Kutsuruba, who were basically the masterminds of the whole event. Then I spoke to Roxolana Shimchuk. I spoke to Oleg Kuzan. Well, Taras Prochaska, whom I mentioned. I probably won't be able to name everybody, but I'm trying to name as many as I can on the spur of the moment. Maria Mayerchik, whom you also might know. So these people, all of these people were absolutely amazing. And some of them were good at recreating the events. Like, for example, Andrian Klishch, he was actually, the guy has amazing memory. He remembered everything, which stood where, logistics of it, like almost geometrically. Then, of course, Marek was invaluable because he was the core of all this. And I'm lucky that I actually got to interview him because he died in 2019. And in December 2018, Igor Kutsuruba was basically murdered, but they tried to, stage it as suicide. So both of them would talk about the actual pool of ideas, that ideas came from Gandhi. They didn't come from anything Soviet and so on. So that was actually very interesting. And they were actually all about nonviolence. That was very, very principally important for them. Then when I spoke to women, they all spoke about some of the elements of what Nina has just read as an excerpt. And I am very grateful to Nina for picking up that particular excerpt. I sometimes see my text too closely to actually see what's in there, because to me it seems like, you know, I've already said that, but I have not maybe. So yeah, and it was even very valuable to listen to people who basically would repeat the sort of the existing discourse as a legend, you see, sort of like, we think this is what happened, but we don't necessarily remember the details, because again, you could see the ideologies of the time. So yeah. And actually, to expand, it wasn't just people who were specifically participants in the revolution that turned out to be, as you say, invaluable. Sometimes it would be just people, just my friends, who would tell me about the Lviv of the 1990s, of which I knew a little bit, but I didn't know, you know, I was an outsider, so I didn't know things about who people would hang out with, what cafes they would frequent, and so on, at which cafe Andruchovich sat, and all of that mattered eventually. Solomia Chubai told me about her father in particular. I also thank her in the acknowledgements, and she was telling how people came to Kvartirniki, which is a reading of poetry, or I don't know, somewhere in somebody's apartment. But you cannot just announce it on Facebook. You have to literally go from person to person, and then you have to walk around and about because somebody's spying after you. So it's like to get to an apartment that's 15 minutes from your apartment would take 3 hours. And she was showing me the routes in which her dad used to walk there.
Well, and for me, I mean, I can also see just like a Ivan and Phoebe tour of Lviv and an Ivan and Phoebe tour of Uzhgorod here happening. But I'm from Lviv and grew up with somebody who was very interested in the architectural history. So place names and the topography of the city is very near and dear to my heart. So the novel is letting me relive that.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, so that's what was going on of Kryvyi Lipy, because you know the children's movie theater was on the other side of Sinetskaya Vereshnya, and that was one of the 2 movie theaters that ran children's movies. So that's where my parents or my grandparents would take me, and my mom would always make sure to walk through Kryvyi Lipy, because she's like, guess what? Secret passage. You know? And so your novel explains a lot. Thank you.
Well, thank you. About Kryvyi Lipy, that's a lot of that comes from Mariana Kianovska, my close friend, and also a Ukrainian writer, and also recipient of Shevchenko Prize the same year as Taras Prochaska. And she was describing very vividly what was happening there in the 1990s. It was quite a different place than it is now. Now it's, of course, much more touristy.
I was going to say so what I found, one of the things I found kind of charming about the novel is that later on, once sort of Rose lays down the law to Ivan and then goes to the Maidan and all this kind of stuff. Later on, Leonid Kravchuk makes the same argument to the women.
Exactly.
And at that point, the students who have been talked to by Rose have a different position. They're like, well, this is so outdated. This is such an outdated view.
Yes, I actually, that was something that came from one of the YouTube videos now, that how Kravchuk is talking finally to some of the leaders of the students. I believe it was to Alès Denis. And he in particular is, I was amazed. I mean, that man, he probably has like a talent for drama. He should have picked like a profession of the actor, not president or anything, because his voice has so like modulations, and he's like, expressions like, these women, they're future mothers. So, but yeah, that's exactly it. He repeats the same, basically, you could say, sexist saying that the leaders of the revolution, well, in the novel say, I would argue that they said that in real life because that's not recorded. But anyway, so this is what's been reported to me by some of the female participants. So yeah.
Dare I draw a comparison with I think we saw similar attitudes later in 2000. When was it? For the latest one?
14. Yes, women had Zhinocha Sotnya in the Maidan. That's right. And then when women started to be part of the combat operations, so they also had to fight for that too. So yeah, it's amazing how revolutions and wars, these rather terrible events sometimes, but they, you know, they allow for these voices to be heard, paradoxically. The 1990s will bestow us with this, you know, Berehenia image versus Barbie image. Oksana Kis wrote a lot about that. So this Soviet femininity was replaced by sort of a traditional eternal mother and a kind of like a glamorous looking woman.
Yes. And so instead of the double burden, we got a triple burden, which is interesting. Well, we won't go too deep into that, but the way patriotisms use gender ideology, of course, is always been very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the novel dramatizes that very well.
Trying. Thank you.
And I will just reiterate that the novel is going to be available in English. It is coming from Deep Vellum in 2022. And by then, maybe we can all go to Texas, or Oksana can come over.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for the conversation. Thank you, dear Nina, and thank you, Olesa, for everything.
But I'd like to move on to our next moderator, invite the next moderator, Ursula Woolley. Among many other roles that she has held, Ursula was project manager and then assistant director of the British Council in Ukraine in 1991 and between 1991 and 1995, where she organized the opening of the first British Council offices in Kyiv, Lviv, and Odessa. And Ursula is one of the Institute's trustees. She is currently also a PhD candidate at University College London School of Slavonic and East European Studies, conducting research into recent local responses in Ukraine to Russian government history propaganda. And Ursula will be in conversation with Viktor Morozov, and she will introduce our next guest herself. Ursula, over to you.
Thank you, Olesya, and happy Independence Day, everybody. And this is like going back to 1991 for me, or perhaps 1992. I'm really excited to be going to Lviv for the first time, but because it's not 1991 or maybe 1992, I actually get to find out what Viktor Morozov is doing, because the first time I turned up in Lviv, everything was still very enclosed, and we had one or two official meetings, and then somebody would whisper, "Did you hear about the amazing show that happened at the Medical Institute?" And I'd be like, "No." And then somebody would take you around town, which was beautiful, and say, "Did you hear about the amazing cabaret that went on in that building?" And I would say, "No." But today, everything is going to be revealed, and that was the fate of the Kiyanka, let alone the English Kiyanka, let alone the English Kiyanka who didn't speak Ukrainian yet in Lviv in 1991 or maybe 92. I am really honored and excited to introduce to you Viktor Morozov, who will be very well known to many of you who we hardly have time to get to talk about all the things he has done and brought to Ukrainian culture over the last, that will be, shall we say 40 years? Maybe even longer. The number of groups that he has sung in and written music for, as long as your arm. I was delighted to hear that the name of one of the first groups you formed was Quo Vadis. I never understood why Ukrainians were always saying to each other, Quo Vadis. It sounded to me like a quote from Asterix, but it wasn't. It was about you. And then, which we will talk about a bit more, the really extraordinary role you and a group of your friends, your otoczenia in Lviv in the 70s and 80s, what you did to change everybody's mood so that things became possible that otherwise wouldn't have become possible. And then for those of you who are much younger, you may know Viktor Morozov not as a famous singer with a striking resemblance to Donny Osmond, but you may know him as the translator of the Harry Potter books. And it is a not very well kept secret that in fact in Ukrainian, and I could vouch for this, I think they're better than in English. Anyway, we're really delighted to welcome Viktor today and really glad that you could be with us. Viktor has promised that he will sing for us a number of songs and a number of excerpts from all through this extraordinary career of bringing the fun and the satire that gave people the confidence to change. And some of those won't have perhaps, it'll be quite hard to understand how that worked now. Viktor, can you tell us, so I've arrived in Lviv and nobody is talking to me except one or two men in Soviet uniforms. But this time I want to know what's really going on. Tell us about when you started in Lviv, tell us about that event at the Medical Institute that got everybody so excited.
Actually, I don't remember what event you're talking about. I can only tell what in the end of 80s and beginning of 90s, there was, we formed a theater cabaret named Nejuris, Don't Worry, in Lviv. And it became extremely popular because we saw political satire, and we helped to get rid of fear by laughter, because we were laughing at all myths, all Soviet myths. And I just want to show some examples of this. For example, at that time, he was living the associate of Stalin, Lazar Kaganovich. He was still alive and well in Moscow, and he was in 20s and 30s. He was a first secretary of Communist Party of Ukraine, and he was the main organizer of the Holodomor. And many people were arrested by his because of his work as a first secretary, and many people got to Siberia and so on and so on. So it was, but he was still alive and well in Moscow, and he was like a Soviet hero. And so we wrote a song, I and Andrei Pancheshin, who wrote the text of the song and I music. We wrote a song about Kaganovich, which we performed from a stage. And I just sing just one small excerpt so that you would understand what it means. Живе ветеран престарілий у стольному граді Москві. Чуприна його посивіла, та очі у нього ясні. До нього ідуть піонери, нащадки Тимура ідуть. Він кожному розповідає про славний життєвий свій путь. Каганович, державна голова. Каганович, історія жива. Каганович, Єжова рідний брат. Каганович, професійний кат. Каганович, професійний кат. Or, for example, another song about Pavlik Morozov, not Viktor Morozov, but Pavlik Morozov. He was also a Soviet hero. Children in school were studying that it was great pioneer. he was a hero. He was famous for denouncing his own father to the police, to the political police, to GPU. And so we made a song about Pavlik Morozov, and it felt like this. Я маленький хлопчик, виліз я на стовпчик, дивлюся і плачу, свого батька бачу. Пильно передивлюся, напишу заяву, заведуть на батька кримінальну справу. Павлік Морозов, зразковий піонер. Павлік Морозов, живий, він ще не вмер. Хлопчики і дівчатка, вбив він свого татка. Павлік Морозов, зразковий піонер, він ще не вмер. And another song which I would like to sing, it's called Thief's Day, День злодія. It was also extremely popular at that time, and actually, I think it's still very modern. Still very actual right now.
I'm going to break your flow just for a minute, because what I love about these songs is the music sounds so harmless, and the words really so not harmless, and it's
mixture of good and bad.
a very subtle mixture. And just want to invite people, while you're singing, people who don't mind their comments going in the chat. If you have a memory of this time, of Lviv, or of wherever you were at the time, or a question that you'd like to ask Victor later, do please put them in the chat now, especially if you've got a memory of the people that he knew or the songs that he's singing. Anyway, День злодія, please.
День злодія. Пайрам пара 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 пайрам парам пара пара пайрам пайрам пара пара пайрам пайрам пара пара пам. Я свято в шахтаря і в енергетика, у цьому є свій пафос і патетика. Є свято в лікарів, у стюардеси є, забута нами лиш одна професія, та заслуговую своєю працею ці люди на врочисту демонстрацію. Лунає життєрадісна мелодія, шампанського й квітів так багато. День злодія, день злодія, день злодія, це все народне свято. Попереду солідні чорні Волги, в них злодії величні, наче боги. За ними неймовірно елегантні, на ладах виїжджають спекулянти, а далі чимчикують дружно пішки, ті, що крадуть з оглядкою і трішки. Позаду, озираючись, дрібочуть, ті, що не можуть вкрасти, але хочуть. Лунає життєрадісна мелодія, шампанського і квітів так багато. День злодія, день злодія, день злодія, це все народне свято. Замайоріли прапорці, це марширують продавці. Струнка хода, здоровий вид, ішов на користь дефіцит. За ними йде за рядом ряд, бюрократичний апарат. На транспарантах угорі слова «Здавайте хабарі!» А далі тисячі ідуть і все несуть, 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 несуть. грає життєрадісна мелодія, шампанського і квітів так багато. День злодія, день злодія, день злодія, це все народне свято. День злодія, день злодія, день злодія, це наше з вами свято.
Thank you. And then
It's still actually just you need to change the car models from Lada to Mercedes, from Volga to BMW, and the rest is the same.
just as relevant today, exactly. And not only in Ukraine. So all of this was happening without foreigners really knowing about it at all, or with only a very limited number of foreigners knowing about it. And then tell us a little bit before you sing the next song about Vivich, about this extraordinary, really extraordinary, surreal festival that you ran a couple of times in Lviv in the early 90s. Tell us about that and how it came about.
Absolutely. It was such an extraordinary event. It was two of them, two festivals in 1990 and 1992, because the Lviv actually is pretty conservative and traditional city, which liked then, loved then simple traditional melodical songs, and that's all. And this festival, it was Vivich, it means dislocation or contortion, something. It really dislocated everything. It was so strange, so phantasmagoric, so grotesque that nobody understood what is happening in Lviv. And the culmination of this festival was in Lviv Opera. Lviv Opera is very solid. And there was as an opera, poetry opera, Kreisel Imperial. It was inspired by poetry of three poets, Yuri Andruchovich, Viktor Nabarak, and Alexander Irvanets, who founded a literary performance group called Boo Babu, which stands for burlesque, bedlam, and buffoonery. And this in Lviv Opera, it was such surreal, this first opera, nobody understood what. It's mixture, ballet, opera, rock, alternative, whatever. And at the start of this first opera, one moment, I'll show you. At the beginning, at the prologue, I went to the stage like this in an image of half dog, half man, something like this, and I was shouting, Julbars, povісися, Julbars, hang. And it was the poetry of Viktor Nabarak. Julbars, it's the name of a dog. And one morning, Viktor Nabarak found that his dog Julbars was dead. He strangled by his own chain. And this tragic event inspired Viktor to write a poem about a dog who commits suicide, choosing spirit over meat. And so I put this poetry music, and I performed this song, and it was kind of an example of this non-orthodox or non-traditional song, kind of new wave, a new song which were starting to flourish in Ukraine. So I'd like to sing this song for you about dog Julbars who committed suicide. And I also invite you, everybody, to help me by making such a very nice sound like, oh.
We'll make it later when we'll be singing.
Try it then. I think you'll make it. Julbars повісився, самогубця пес. Джульбарса поженуть з небес. Там йому скажуть, не здох, як слід. Там його підважать під хвіст і під. Джульбарс повісився на цепу вночі. Справжнє кіно ноцне, щурі глядачі. І зітхання, і завивання, і залицяння, і злягання. Джульбарс повісився. Чуєте ви? Ви читаєте? Листя трави? Маркеса, Борхеса, Гесе і Дзіна. Джульбарс повісився, ось переміна. Ти звешся поетом, а він собакою. Тебе вірш гризе, а його ланцюг. Ти станеш колись професійним писакою, а Джульбарс вибрав не м'ясо, а дух. Скільки можна на місяць брехати, скільки можна чекати зарплати, скільки можна за дива дерти вічно до смерти. Що за професія шизофренічна? Вік сторожити курей, які зме, і посилати їх на заріз, на заріз, і на заріз, на заріз, на заріз. Пронизує землю і небеса, сузір'я пса. Пронизує землю і небеса.
Thank you. And now a brief pause. So for those of us who were on the outside at the time, it's amazing to think that this is what gave everybody the kind of shot of confidence to know that they could all get through the next 30 years, one way or another. But a moment of seriousness now, because, as I say, we were talking about the mismatch between the words and the music earlier, and somebody's just reminded us in the chat that I think it was in 1989 that at one of your events, you were leading the first ever public singing since the arrival of the Soviet Union of the Ukrainian national anthem on stage.
It was twice. First, it was at Червона Рута festival in Chernivtsi, Then there was final concert at the stadium. Our Bart, our Kobzar play from Nezhuris. Unfortunately, he is already gone to the heaven. Vasil Zhdankin, absolutely unexpectedly for everybody, started to sing from a stage the national anthem. It was the first ever performance, and he called me and Eduard Drach to the stage, and we came and sang it together. And then after that, in a month, we as Nezhuris had a premiere of new performance called Povia Vitr Stepovy, the step wind blows, or something like that. There at the Lviv Philharmonic already at official stage, we also sang national hymn already in like it was never before, and we remembered everybody stood up, and it was fantastic.
And there's a wonderful recollection by the politician Mykola Zhulinsky, where he talks about, I think it's Roman Kupczynski, the former, who was the chief editor of Radio Svoboda in Ukraine until for a long time, for 10 or 15 years, I think, rushing into...
And he was also the editor of magazine Suchasness in New York, and publishing house Prolog also in New York.
He rushed into the offices of Prolog and Suchasness in New York and told Zhulinsky, I can't remember quite why he was there, have you heard about this singing of the national anthem? Have you heard about this group? Definitely Soviet power is going to collapse in Ukraine. And the meaning of what you did was taken as the sign that the Soviet regime was going to collapse by people who were watching the system most closely. And that, to me, is extraordinary. And that's something really to be proud of. And we're all really grateful that you could share that with us tonight. I've got a couple of questions here before you sing for us, possibly even let us join in with one last song. William is asking if you could say just a little bit about your Batyarsky pisni and why they were so important to people in Lviv, and why you started using Batyarsky songs again when you started reworking these political lyrics later on.
Yeah, it would be a very long story. Actually, Roman Kupczynski, in that recollection of Mykola Zhulinsky, he went and showed the video of Nezhuris, and he told, look at it, Lviv Batyar, Lviv Batyars. So he already called us Batyari. But the Batyar song is such an underground culture. It was formed in Lviv at the beginning of last century. Actually, Batyars, there were hooligans, hoodlums, but they created great songs full of irony, even such a tragic events. For example, like Romeo and Juliet, Lviv's about daughter of a butcher and her lover who wanted to marry her, but the father of the daughter didn't want to. Daughter of butcher is great. She needs somebody more rich and so on. So they bought a piece of kolbasa with poison, and they ate this kolbasa with poison, and they died like Romeo and Juliet. But the song is very ironical, and then it's like everything that's Batyar did and sang and so on. But I was wondering all the time why nobody nobody sings this song in the 70s and 80s. So I started to sing it myself. And then some of my friends, Yuri Vanichuk and Andrei Panchishin, Bogdan Stelmach, began slightly Ukrainize this song. And then they started to give me new texts, and we started to write absolutely new butter songs. And so it was kind of resurrection of this butter culture in Lviv. And I think it's good.
Thank you. And one last question that I think Nina Murray asked earlier. Which cafe were you hanging out in Lviv at the time of Ukrainian independence?
A lot of it was in Virmenka Street. It was Virmenka Cafe. It was very popular, hippie joint like this was. It was then Nectar Cafe. It was very popular, but then now it's already is not existing. So it's the most popular. And then when Ziga appeared, so everybody. Also on Virmenska Street, so everybody was hanging out at Ziga at that time.
Thank you. And now, if we are very lucky, and if you, everyone who can, in a minute gets to turn on their cameras and even unmute themselves very briefly, I think Victor is going to tell us one last story and sing us one last song.
Okay. So today is 30th anniversary of independence, so it's great to sing the song about Ukraine, and I have such a song, and it's called "Oh My Dear Ukraine." It's bilingual song. It's the verses are in Ukrainian and the refrain is in English. But what's interesting that some time ago, we made a video clip on this song, and who do you think with? I was in that video clip with our pretty director of Institute in London, Olesya Khromichuk.
Father, is this Russia?
No, this is Ukraine.
So Olesya played a part of my daughter. I was her father. And now I think we'll sing again together this song. And I invite everybody to sing the refrain. It's pretty easy. The words very easy. Oh, my dear Ukraine, my love. And melody also pretty easy. Oh, my dear Ukraine. Oh, my dear Ukraine. Oh, my dear Ukraine, my love. So I invite everybody to sing this final songs of my short performance for you. Oh, my dear Ukraine, the song of Kost Moskalets.
If you're suffering from cataract, diabetic retinopathy,
Цей твій сон не скінчиться ніколи. Ти будеш одна, твій портрет завбільшки з долоню розтане між хмар, між дивних людей. Oh, my dear Ukraine, oh, my dear Ukraine, oh, my dear Ukraine, my love. Ти не будеш сумна чи весела між весняних дощів. Погляд твій розплетені коси розтануть, як дим, між дивних людей.
My dear Ukraine, oh my dear Ukraine, oh my dear Ukraine, oh my dear Ukraine.
тоді ти відчуєш тривогу і навіть любов до дивних людей. My dear friend, oh my dear friend, oh my dear friend, my love, and one more time, oh my dear friend, oh my dear friend, oh my dear friend, my love. My love. My love. My love. Моя любов. Слава Україні!
Героям
So please join me in thanking Victor for leading us through that. Thank you for those songs.
Ukraine.
And thank you for that memory, Victor. It was such an honor to act as your daughter in that video.
Thank you so much, Banavita.
Thank you.
And please come and sing to us again soon and sometime in real life.